Back on Daily Scone. Appreciate you for being part of the show. As I mentioned, every single day, do us a solid. Subscribe, however you're listening to this. If there's someone in sports media or who aspires to be, or who you think might find this helpful, pass it along. There's tons of episodes. And if you have questions, please feel free to pass them along because, quite honestly, that's how we get some of the best topics for conversation and content. And that's actually what we're going to do today. Someone who listened on YouTube to an episode a couple of weeks ago commented, I can try to pronounce it, Zhertaravic.
Wow.
Zertarvik.
Oh.
You want to give that one a go, bro?
You got that one, bro. Let's go with Big Z.
Big Z. So Big Z said, how do morning sports radio shows prep for shows that come in the morning with information and topics that came on the night before? So I don't do morning radio, but Jordy Culotta does, host of Off the Bench on ESPN Radio in Baton Rouge, so he's good enough to waste 20 minutes with me. How are you, bro?
My man, Scone. Good to be with you, bro.
Dude, thanks so much. So
Yep.
Let's just take it from the top with Big Z's question. How do you prep for a morning show?
Well, just like you never get away from it, right? I mean, my head is always buried in Twitter. I'm always watching some type of sports, listening to sports, watching the Twitter timeline to find out what's going on. But for the most part, I have my show formatted each and every day. At the 30s, at the top of each hour, I like to do a guest. So 7:30, well, I'm 7 to 9 a.m. Central Time. So every single day, Monday through Friday, I like 7:30 to have a guest. I like 8:30 to have a guest. Now, every single day, that's not going to work out like that, but I like to have a guest per hour that's topic relevant. For instance, today, I know that we're recording this on Tuesday. I had Doug Williams on this morning, who's now a part of the front office of the Washington Redskins. Spoke with him last week on just setting up. Yeah, right, exactly. From Zachary. Spoke with him last week. What's a good day for you that works next week? Speaking of this one, he said, Tuesday or Wednesday works better for me. Okay, I have an opening on Tuesday at 7:30. How's that work for you? 8:30 Central Time in D.C.? Yep. Okay, mark me down. So you have your guests taken care of. After that, you look at what's news relevant. Last night, the SEC putting some teams into the College World Series was big. We stayed on top of those games. We gave you those headlines this morning to lead off the show. So, I mean, it's just this constant, you never get away from it. I don't know if there's an exact formula every day that I follow, but I make sure that I'm keeping up with social media. I watch every single day. I watch PTI. I DVR that to see what those guys are talking about from a national standpoint. Watch that through the afternoon, see if any of those topics carry on through the night. A lot of those are the topics that were mainstream news within the last 24 hours, but some of them are carryover if they're previewing a game, for the finals, obviously, with the NBA just wrapping up last week. We were on top of all those finals games, watching what was happening. Some of them go late into the night. I mean, the Florida Auburn baseball game went into 11:30.
Do you stay up and watch them?
Not all the time.
So give me a normal night for you. As far as what you watch, what time you're in bed, what time you're up.
Right, so like when I get in, parent responsibilities early afternoon, get with Jordan. He's usually got a baseball practice, get him fed, get him bathed, get him ready for dinner. Once he gets down, then I'm going to my DVR. 8 o'clock is his bedtime. So 8 o'clock, he's going down. I'm usually out of his room about 8:10. So about 8:30, I'll start getting to my DVR, get through PTI. If there's a live sports game on, I'll have that on a digital surface, whether it's my iPad, whether it's an iPhone, or some type of viewing to make sure I'm watching an LSU baseball game, a finals basketball game, to see what people were talking about throughout the day. That going on too, like a PTI on demand type deal. I watched Dan Le Batard's show. I can't even think of it now. Highly questionable.
HQ.
Yep. DVR that one as well, just to get a little personality from sports. So I'll start watching that into the night. But now I'm usually starting to kind of, because I'm doing this in bed. I usually get in bed about 8:30, 9 o'clock. And I'm doing all this viewing and kind of taking some notes mentally, writing some notes down on my phone for tomorrow morning to keep up with. And usually I'm asleep at 10 o'clock.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Like it's if there's a game on that I need to watch, I'll kind of force myself to stay up, but my body clock at this point just won't allow me because I wake up every day at 4:15.
Okay,
no
so
alarm clock.
Alarm at 4:15.
No alarm clock.
So you're just up.
Right. I'm up.
Wow.
My body pops up, and it doesn't matter if it's Saturday, Sunday, matter if Aaron and I could go out and have a good dinner, have a couple glasses of wine, and still you're up 4:15. So 4:15, that's when I get into the finals, like the final scores of last night, to get the the definite news. What happened? What was the outcomes of the games last night that I need to report on this morning? And, the relevant news topics, hopefully I've done enough last night with the reading of what's coming up to have an understanding of what we're going to talk about in our A block. The A block, I know they use that in television, but we call that 7:15 on Off the Bench. I like to have the biggest story of the day there. So we have our headline segment from 7 to 7:10 where we just kind of recap all those news stories. We take the biggest one out of the headlines and put it in the 7:15 segment and talk about that for 5 to 6 minutes.
And then you go into a guest at 7:30.
Going to guest at 7:30.
And you wrap an hour.
Close an hour there.
Do you all right, so up at 4:15, what time are you in the building?
5:15.
So you're in the building at 5:15, so you got an hour and 45 before you go in there. What are you doing for that hour 45?
Hour 45, I'm making sure I'm getting all my biography notes right on my guest to make sure that I'm introducing them correctly, not giving them, not taking away anything that they may have accomplished. Want to make sure and give them. I look at it, and I got this from you. I'm inviting them over to my house. I don't want to invite somebody over to my house and disrespect them. I asked you to come here this morning, Doug Williams. Let's make sure and talk about what you accomplished at Northeast High School, at Grambling, playing for Eddie Robinson, first pick, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, all that stuff. I want to know all that. Whether or not I say it or not, I want to have that just in my mind so I know that. That's a lot of the stuff that I'm doing when I get in. Rivers, our producer, does a great job of formatting the show. So when we get in, we all use a document that we all have access to. And she does a good job of, because I'll send her the guest names the day before. So she'll have 7:30 Doug Williams in, 8:30 we're talking to Neil Weiner about his cornerback this morning.
So you have the template and you're plugging into the template.
So I'm just plugging I'm just dumping all the
Rivers,
news in
and then you obviously T-Bob's the co-host. So what is the role whenever you get in the morning or at night with T? Like, do you all communicate at night?
Yes.
In the morning?
T-Bob is responsible for putting together like a lot of the numbers and the meat of the discussion in the 7:15, 8:15 blocks. I'm solely responsible for the guest.
Okay.
I get every guest that comes on the show. And then from there, we just kind of start feeding that document. Rivers kind of oversees the whole thing. She puts the top stories and headlines. And from there, we just kind of fill in the information. Nathan's our video producer. He's getting video, B-roll, and all of our guests on our topics that are being talked about and discussed that day. So everybody comes in. Rivers is the first one in the building. I usually kind of stumble in, say about 5:15. She's here every day at 5 a.m. And 5:15, then Nathan and T-Bob will get in there. And everybody has a defined role to get in there and kind of work. So it's pretty much quiet till about 6:30. Outside of a couple of questions, hey, what's this? Where are we going to go with that? Outside of that, I mean, it's everybody's kind of in their workspace and kind of just typing away. 6:30, we start discussing, like how do we want to get in, get out? Maybe we want to set up the guests in the second hour by bringing up a topic in the first hour that somebody discussed. We had Ryan Clark on yesterday. He's Derek Stingley Jr.'s 7-on-7 summer coach.
Right.
We had Neil Weiner on today, who's his high school coach. We played a soundbite from Clark yesterday talking about Stingley coming into the Weiner interview. We discussed all that at 6:30 this morning.
Yeah, that's great. Great cross promotion as well to throw back to a podcast from a previous episode.
Right.
So it sounds like you work more than just 2 hours a day.
Surprisingly.
Is it different? The schedule is interesting to me. Like, I would hate to do mornings. I did mornings at one point, and the schedule is just brutal. Is it? I didn't do mornings when I had a family. Do you feel like your schedule or the job would be different if you didn't have the responsibility of having a son at home?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think that for us, I always felt before him, I always felt guilty getting away from the content. Like if I didn't have sports radio on, if I didn't have a TV in front of my face, if I didn't have my smartphone in my hand where I could get to social media, I almost felt like guilty. Like I was missing some type of news. Yeah. I wasn't catching on the exact moment that sports news was breaking, and that was a big anxiety point for me. He relieved a lot of that. I mean, he kind of structured me in the way that I digest my news when I take it in. It's all good that if I'm not paying attention to the sports while I'm with him, and my phone and my nose isn't buried in my face while he and I are throwing the ball in the backyard, something simple like that. So yes, I mean, like, he has totally changed the way that I format, and actually it's probably brought me more structure. It's probably gotten me to a point where I'm more structured to the point. I understand when I'm with him, it's our time, it's family time. I understand that, like he and I will watch the ball game,
right,
and we'll watch sports and we'll talk sports because he likes it and he's passionate about it. But I'm not by any means forcing him to do prep work with me before we go to bed. We're not.
Kid, give me Aaron Nola's whip in June.
We're not reading your book. All right, we got to find out what's going on with the Phillies here.
So something I talk about often is get your foot in the door, and that would actually be a great thing to talk to you about. Is just about like the hustle to get in. You started here producing on Talk in the morning when Bill and I did the morning deal, which was weird. It's so weird. It's like we could do whole episodes on this. But so if you can even bring yourself back to then, how different is it for you producing mornings as opposed to hosting mornings? Like for the person listening who maybe has an ambition of hosting but recognizes, man, foot in the door is just however you get in, and maybe that's on the producer side.
That was my intent back then, was just to get in. I was my dude. I was telling you, I was emailing you, Gordy, Hannegriff, whatever you guys needed from me, and I love that story, like personally, because I'll tell it away from you guys, and I know when
you stalker,
right? When Hannegriff tells it, he almost is like he's embarrassed to say it in front of me because he don't. I'm like, bro, scream it, say it out loud. They called me the stalker before I was hired here.
It's a great lesson, man.
Because I was not going to take no.
Don't let people forget about you.
No chance. He was not going to not hire me. And I told Gordy that. He kept telling me no. I said, well, I'll be back tomorrow. You know what I mean? Like, I'm going to be here tomorrow.
I had been here for like a hot minute.
Yeah, maybe like 3 weeks.
Like a minute.
Yeah.
And you're blowing me up. I'm like, bro,
I know you can get me the job, dude. Get me the job.
You're
like, dude, bro, I'm just trying to fit in.
What I'm doing in here. And then the first thing you ever did was when we had LSU Football Media Day.
That's exactly right.
And you came.
He told me. He said, I got something for you.
And I gave you a recorder, and you didn't record it.
And I messed it up.
I
messed it up.
You didn't hit the record
I had the recorder off all day and probably got 30 interviews.
And the kicker about it though is like that's the one, especially under Les. That was the one day.
Yeah, you had
where you had everybody. Freshmen, like get it today because you're not getting it again until next year on this day. My boy didn't hit record. It seems to have worked out.
Yeah.
All right, so we have a couple minutes here, so I wanted to talk to you about booking guests, and I guess if you're listening and you have follow-up questions, fire away in the comments on whatever platform you're listening to this, or you can always email mattmoscona@gmail.com. And be on the lookout. Tomorrow, we will publish part 2 of our conversation with Jordy, and we'll address booking guests and how to book guests for radio interviews. There is an art and a science to it, and there's nobody better at doing that I know than Jordy. So that'll be part 2 tomorrow. In the meantime, thanks for being here. Share this episode, please. Share this episode. Pass it on. Daily Scone.